sometimes they think of it like fitness. The more focus, attention, effort you put into it, the better and better it gets. Well, sleep is one of these things where it's like you want to put enough attentionality behind it to make it good and optimize. But beyond that, you don't really want to be focusing on it too much. You have to have the mentality that that is your sacred place, and that when you get in that bed, there's a feeling of relaxation and almost like you don't have to worry about anything. And that's a big miss for people. It's like a checklist. It's like, okay, temperature, check, lights, check, all this stuff. But mindset is a very elusive thing. And sometimes that attention can actually pull you in the wrong direction. Like they did studies on counting sheep, and people who actually counted sheep, it took them longer to fall asleep because you're just bringing attention to the fact that you can't sleep. You're not going to like overthink or overstress your way into better sleep.
Todd, thanks for taking some time to chat with us today. Sleep, we haven't talked about sleep with someone for a while. We've had a couple people on the podcast, but we know how important it is, and we know that we need to get that message out to other people because there's so many things that I feel like people can be paying attention to that will help with those sleep issues that they just don't know how to solve.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, there's nothing more I like to talk about than sleep. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when this is released, we will already be like deep in the postpartum period, but
2 children.
Yeah,
the sleep will be.
You're
sleep,
going to be in the pain cave for sure.
Yeah, we'll see how sleep changes.
How do we fix that sleep issue? That's my question.
You know, I get asked that a ton, especially as I get older, and I've kind of committed to the point of like, I don't want to speak too much on it until I experience it, because I think there's a level of like experience you need to fully comprehend what people are going through.
Yeah.
But my number one tip is like, when you get the chance to sleep, like actually sleep, don't just like lightly like pass out on the couch. Like go to your place of sleep and actually make it count. Don't like do this in between where you're just going to close your eyes for a second, because it's pretty sacred.
So don't do like this one does, where she has the monitor sitting there right next to her.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Just the instincts, though.
Sorry to call you out, babe.
Well, and I think what I did bad last time as well, and I will admit, is that I would breastfeed late at night and then grab my phone and scroll.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard. Listen, easier said than done.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so anyways, before we dive into all the nuances on so much more, what initially attracted you into sleep optimization? Like, why go down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, so I initially, going way back, I was an athlete, played football, and I was obsessed with, performance. I walked on. I was always kind of behind the 8 ball as far as talent went in relative to where I was at and where I was playing. So I just felt like I had to like eke out every ounce of talent. But so I just became obsessed with human performance, went into the strength conditioning world, worked with athletes. And then I got to spend some time 10 years ago with some amazing sleep doctors, sleep psychologists. And when I started implementing some of this stuff with people, no matter who they were, from Olympians to, your average mom, it was by far the fastest, most impactful way to increase someone's quality of life and performance. So, I think as a strength conditioning coach, and you guys can probably attest to this being in the PT world, right? Like most people in that space are driven by helping people. And I was like, at the time, I was like, there's this huge thing that I would argue isn't even one of the buckets of health, wellness, longevity. I would say it's the foundation, just because of its impact on the other buckets that no one was talking about. It almost blew my mind when I started peeling back the layers and the data and looking around. And so, started speaking on it, saw the impacts real time and feedback, and then kind of started dedicating myself, taking any course I could on sleep. But the other thing I quickly realized was the clinical world was pretty robust, but this wellness optimization, I don't really love that like term, but how do you take someone, how do you make someone feel really great? There was very minimal, even the studies or anyone really diving into that. Now things have changed quite a bit, which is cool, but it just felt like there was like a real need for it. And it was cool to connect those dots.
Did you start doing this work yourself when you were an athlete?
So, it's funny. I distinctly remember like in 2010, one of the first studies came out linking like sleep deprivation and testosterone levels. And that really was like, I remember my first kind of like data driven sleep realization. And, because in college, in the performance world, there was like, obviously testosterone is a big thing. So that's kind of like, that was like a trigger word, So when I saw that, I started really, it was always a focus, but then it just started to reinforce it more and more. And I would say that me and my roommate focused on sleep more than most college athletes. We still went out and had a good time, but we would never do it the night before a workout or practice, because that study was like, we saw like, it was like a 25% reduction in testosterone the next day. So in my head, I was like, well, I don't want to like basically negate the work I'm putting in the next day, which was a little ahead of its time, compared to most kids, I would say.
Do you feel like you noticed any difference after kind of making that shift in your head?
For sure. It was kind of subtle, and also there was part of it was just being a good teammate and committing to your team that also was involved. So I was never like a wild child, but I definitely think it made a difference cumulatively over the 4 years or so, because I went from like a very average walk-on to, being the strongest guy on our team. And I think that stuff like that had a big impact and played a bigger role than I probably realized on some of the success. Yeah,
that's huge. I mean, I wasn't even in athletics in college, but I definitely, lived the life where it was like, oh, I don't need sleep. I could pull all-nighters. I could do whatever. And I would say back then, like, why do we not feel as much of an impact as we do as we age? Like, why is it that we feel that we can do that and still pass tests and still live life?
Still function.
Period. Yeah, still function. And then as we get older, it really shifts.
Yeah, naturally, I think there's a few reasons. I think that naturally we do need less and less sleep as we get older. And it is more difficult for our body to get in to those deeper sleep cycles as we age. So there's a part of, there's just physiological part that ties into that. But I also think there's just so many factors. I do think, though, majority of issues, especially from alcohol, like come from the sleep deprivation, right? Because if you think about it, what it's happening, it's not only the fact that you're not sleeping as much. Let's say you're staying up late, you're only sleeping 5 or 6 hours. You're cutting the quantity down and a massive impact on the quality. So like it's probably comparable to like one night of sleep when you go out really late and start drinking. I don't think people realize that they're the compounding on each other as opposed to just one or the other. And I think that's part of it. And I also think just the lifestyle is a part that people don't recognize. I mean, obviously, as we age, our body becomes less efficient at breaking things down, less efficient at sleeping, less efficient at those deep sleep cycles, more sensitive to circadian rhythm, so you combine that where your body's pretty regular with your normal wake time and sleep time, combine that with, responsibilities, right? Like oftentimes in college, I think if it's a psychological thing, if you don't have anything to do, you can just hang out. So you don't really realize how bad you feel comparatively to when you're older, when you actually have to do stuff and get up and get around. So I think there's a definite shift, and you definitely feel worse when you're older. But I do think a lot of it is psychological and tied into the awareness of it, honestly.
That's true.
So in this now more popularized wellness space of sleep health, I feel like sleep hygiene gets thrown out there a lot. Like, oh, you just got to focus on sleep hygiene. But what is that? Like, how would you define sleep hygiene and what that actually means?
That's hard. Yeah, that's a very wide net. I think that's different for everybody, every single person. I think that's something that people need to be aware of is like, it doesn't matter how you get there. It only matters that you're there. And I think sometimes people, I'll talk to people that are like, I get 8 hours of sleep. I'm super consistent with my bedtime. But I'm thinking about getting, a cooling pad for my bed to optimize the sleep. And I'm like, well, sleep, if everything's going well, that's not something that like, it can't infinitely get better. It's like there's a ceiling there. And I think there's been this swing of the pendulum actually, where it's starting to become a little impactful in a negative way for some people, because I think sometimes they think of it like fitness, for example, where, right, if you're a runner, the more focus, attention, effort you put into it, the better and better it gets. Well, sleep is one of these things where it's like, you want to put enough attentionality behind it to make it good and optimize. But beyond that, you don't really want to be focusing on it too much. You just, the biggest thing, honestly, the psychological side of sleep is so much more impactful than any of the data. It's like, if you don't associate your bedroom and your bed with restfulness and calm and peace, you're going to be in a bad place no matter how many devices you buy and optimization tricks and hacks and all this stuff. Like, you have to have the mentality that is your sacred place. And that when you get in that bed, there's a feeling of relaxation and almost like, you don't have to worry about anything. And that's a big miss for people. I think this data-driven world has taken it down this path of like, okay, it's like a checklist. It's like, okay, temperature, check, lights, check, all this stuff. But mindset is a very elusive thing. And sometimes that attention can actually pull you in the wrong direction. Like, they did studies on counting sheep, and people who actually counted sheep fell asleep. It took them longer to fall asleep because you're just bringing attention to the fact that you can't sleep. So I think that's like a nice little snapshot of sleep as a whole. It's like, set yourself up for a great night, set your routines and things that relax you and your environment, but you're not going to like overthink or overstress your way into better sleep.
You're kind of saying the person who's so anxious that they're like, I need to have it at this exact temperature. I need to meditate for an hour. I need to be away from my technology. I can't even see my phone light up, and hop in my bod pod that hyperoxygenates the air, and then my sleep will be perfect. That can actually be pretty detrimental.
Yeah. And I would say there's this part of sleep that honestly, ignorance is bliss. Some of the best sleepers, the most resilient sleepers I know, don't think about this stuff at all. My wife is one of those people, high level athlete. She's Olympian, never had a problem and never has even considered it. And she can sleep wherever, whenever, falls asleep right away. And so there's a point of no return where, once it's good, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't keep trying to go further and further into this world.
I mean, that's him. He could, on a dime, just fall asleep.
I lay in my bed, and even if I'm wide awake when I lay down, it's like,
But for the people like me who don't just fall asleep, like, are there certain practices that would be supportive, or are there things that you suggest minimally to at least start to address to help? Like, why might someone get into bed that it feels like that is my restful place, like that is the place that I want to sleep, but yet my mind is racing?
Well, you just said the place I want to sleep. Just the way you said that right there. It's like, that doesn't mean that you're like, the way you even phrase that makes me think like when you get into bed, you're thinking, I really want to sleep, which is not a calm, restful feeling, right?
That's
so
true.
And I think that's where you have to start. I think a lot of people will start with like routine and this and that. And I think a couple things. I think the first thing to consider is like, why are you struggling with that? Like, what are you thinking about? Why are you so anxious about it? Oftentimes it's nothing to do with sleep, right? Sometimes it's things you need to address in your own life, and I'm not saying this about you at all, but with a lot of the population, the first two things I'll talk to them about is if you don't feel purpose in your life and you don't have good relationships, chances are your sleep isn't going to be great. And that has nothing to do with your sleep hygiene, right? So that's oftentimes think about, okay, when you get in bed and you start worrying about things, what are you worrying about? Why are you worrying about them? Don't overlook just life and the foundation of what life is about, right? And then from that point, I think now you can start peeling back the layers, right? But, when you think a place of restfulness, I think when you think about building out a routine or things that impact your sleep, it's like you have to figure out like what does make you feel relaxed. Like think back, what are points in your life or times when you really feel like you were able to unwind and kind of let everything go? And if there's things that you can duplicate from feeling that way, that's things you start to implement, and so that's part of it. And the other thing I think that's really easy and overlooked is kind of creating a continuum from your living space to your bedroom. I think oftentimes there's this black and white where it's like I'm awake in my living space and then I want to go to bed. And that's just not how it necessarily works. So controlling the lighting, the temperature, how much screen time, all those things earlier in the night, kind of along the same time as the sun would set, as opposed to as soon as you walk in the bedroom, now you're trying to shut everything down. But then the last thing in that breath is like, when you get in bed and you start thinking like, oh, I really want to sleep, like start worrying about it, like get out of that space. Like don't, because the more you're in that space in your bed, having those thoughts, like your brain is now linking that space, your environment, the sense, the surroundings with that feeling. And our brain is really good at holding on to that. So, you almost want to exit that situation until you're tired and you feel ready and like you're almost excited to go to bed because you want to rest.
So it's like treating myself like a baby. You can't force a baby down. You got to change, go outside, put them in water, do something different.
Yeah. I don't want to say there's not like things, we talk about like the sauna and things like that. There are definitely things that can trigger like, calming down and creating that feeling. But for the most part, I think people start there when I really think it's doing some, holding the mirror up to yourself and thinking about, why am I anxious? Like, what does make me relaxed? Are there things I can address or talk about in my life that would eliminate those problems? Because that's usually the path people go down. They're like, I can't sleep. I have a sleeping problem. They go to a doctor looking for a quick fix. They start taking a supplement when it has nothing to do with sleep. It's like you hate your job and you're up at 3 a.m. thinking about it all day. Like that's not a sleep problem, right? Like that's nothing to do with it.
You've brought up a couple times light and temperature, and I'm just interested to get the take on like what that flow looks like as far as the importance of light and what light we're exposed to.
Yeah.
I guess, and I've heard from previous people we've talked to, like this is a day-long thing. This isn't just like the hours before you go to bed. Like really optimizing that circadian rhythm has to do with our light exposure throughout the entire day. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our circadian rhythm is a 24-hour clock, and I think people don't realize, getting that light exposure in the morning kind of is like the leaping point of our circadian rhythm. So getting some sunlight, some energy in your eyes. I even just got some new glasses that like mimic the wavelengths of sunlight. They're wild looking. You put them on and they like blow light into your eyes. But yeah, I think it's more about like the timing of the light and then being strategic at nighttime. But I think blue light's got kind of demonized, right? Like, people think that it's like all blue light's bad and this and that. When blue light's amazing. I mean, the sun has tons of blue light, right? And it's super energetic and it's great in the morning to kick that circadian rhythm off, bring that cortisol back down, like that natural flow of the day. But I think the easiest way to do it is just like your normal sunrise, sunset. Like imagine you lived outside. Like that's kind of how you want to replicate the day. Like that's kind of the best way to go about things. And you think about the sunset getting more red towards the end of the night and winding down at that 6 o'clock, 6:30 time. That's ideal. And I think, thinking about that from an evolutionary perspective is an easy way to go about it rather than thinking about, okay, what wavelengths, blue light, green light, red light, how do I like mimic all this stuff? I think you use some of those tools just to duplicate what we evolved doing. Right. So I think some of the blue light blocking glasses are great, just to mimic that sunset and start relaxing you. But at the end of the day, blue and green light are going to be the most invigorating for our brain. And the way that screens nowadays look really sharp and crisp are by pumping out massive amounts of that blue light because it creates that crisp white look on an LED screen. And so the blue light glasses are awesome. You put them on and like, you're like, wow, this is super nice and relaxing. And you realize how much your brain's actually stimulated by light. I don't think people often associate those things. And the other thing is if you can get out in the morning and go for just a walk, just think like just do some internal thinking about your mood and how you feel just within that, your optimism towards life, as opposed to like sitting at your kitchen table and getting ready for the day. I think you'll realize pretty quickly how much our brain responds to light. Mm-hmm. And then temperature. I don't know if you guys use any cooling things, but I use 8 Sleep, and I mean they're unbelievable. But there is like the dark side is like when you go somewhere that doesn't have one, it's tough. But yeah, so at night, our body it has to cool down. Our core temperature drops a degree and a half before we can really get into the sleep cycles. And so you have to almost give your body the ability to cool down. So that doesn't necessarily mean, I think people sometimes are confused, like, well, if my room is cold and I have all these blankets on and I'm warm, like, what is that even doing? You don't need to be like freezing. You just need to have the temperature in the environment where your body has the ability to cool down if it needs it, right? So if you feel hot, you can adjust things and it's able to cool itself down. If you're hot at night, you're going to really have a tough time sleeping. So being mindful of that temperature, cool room, 65 degrees, somewhere around there. is really useful. And that's why some of the heat before bed is also useful, just to, opens up your blood vessels, gets some of the blood flow to your extremities, also heat your core temperature up. So then when you expose it to that cool environment, it cools down really rapidly. And you're able, oftentimes, it can cut your time into that first sleep cycle in half about.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If someone is really, have gotten into the habit of watching a screen before bed, whether it's the TV that they have in their bedroom or on their phone, do we know how that is impacting sleep?
Yeah. It's interesting. This is a good talking point, because I think there are some misconceptions. So there was the original study that came out on the blue light stuff it wasn't super strong evidence. It was there was an impact, definitely impacts melatonin production, but it wasn't anything crazy, as far as the outcomes went. And so the things we do know is one of the most impactful things is actually the amount of time we're exposed to the light. Not necessarily I think people think of it, it's I'm looking at screens or I'm not. And it's actually 2 hours of screen time exposure is far more impactful than 1 hour, right? So I think some people think I looked at my phone for 5 minutes, I kind of ruined that. No, it's actually to do with the amount of time before bed. And if you think about that, just think about energy absorption, right? It takes time for your brain to absorb energy and be stimulated. So it's not like you ruin it as soon as you look at the screen. But I think that the missing component of this entire thing is the content that you're actually consuming. And I think the more that we dive into the idea of screens being impactful, they didn't look at what type of content that people were actually looking at. And that actually has, I would argue, a bigger impact than the actual screen, because if it's super engaging or violent or action and you're really, really into it, that's going to wake you up or keep you awake more than if something's in the background, you've seen it 100 times, you're not really paying attention, but it's still relatively bright. You can just think of those scenarios, right? Sometimes we get so down the data path, but there's logic there, and we're finding that out. Some of the newer studies coming looking at what type of content we're consuming before bed as opposed to the actual light. We're seeing that more and more. So I think, everybody jokes about watching Friends or The Office and reruns, but I think part of that is the reason why you like that and it's calming is because you're not paying attention, you're not engaged, and you actually are able to fall asleep faster. And then the other part of that too is there are some people that grew up and they associate that with bedtime. So there's a chance also, when we're talking about that psychological side, is if that person really associates the restfulness and that peacefulness with those shows, that could actually be a net positive, right? So it's very individualized. And again, if you keep in mind, when do I feel almost excited to go to bed? I can totally just relax and let everything go. That feeling is really what you're after.
It kind of reminds me, my college roommate and I had never fallen asleep with a TV on. That was never a thing for me. But again, I fall asleep in any scenarios. And he needed to have Sports Center on to fall asleep. And he would just turn it on, set an hour timer on the TV, and then he'd sleep just fine. And what you just brought up, it makes me think of, if I can use you as a little case example here. Well, Friends, big Friends fan over here. But also the content you're consuming, Jen loves to play a game or two of solitaire on her phone to wind down at the end of the day, and how that differs from scrolling the, social medias and consuming political content or something that is very, aggravating and stimulating. I definitely can see how those differ, and her getting into bed and playing a game or two of solitaire isn't going to ruin things. It might actually help her get to that restful place.
And that's what I mean. It's if you studied your friend in college, I guarantee you it'd be detrimental to not have the TV on, because he's so closely linking those things. So that's what I mean. It's all the studies are great, right? And it's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's about getting quality and quantity sleep. Anything outside of that is just the process in which you get there. You're not getting better sleep necessarily because you have the perfect wind down routine that Huberman recommended. You know what I mean? That doesn't actually change. It could, but if you're already getting great sleep and there's certain things that are individualized to you, don't overthink it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So can we talk about hormones a little bit? Because that shifts a ton through a woman's life. And especially, that's where a lot of people will complain. Like, I used to sleep great. Now I'm into perimenopause and my sleep is horrible. Yep. So what can be done in those instances when we are just having those hormonal shifts and changes?
Yeah, I think especially for females, I think there's three things that are really useful. And the first thing is give yourself some grace. Understand that you're fighting your physiology. There's ups and downs. There's things out of your control. So don't beat yourself up. Don't sit there and be like, why can't I sleep? And think about how bad you're going to feel. Listen, a lot of people out there going through this, you've given birth to a child. You've done way harder things than getting through a day without good sleep. So you're going to be okay, and just recognize, like, there's going to be nights that you don't sleep well. There's change going on in your body, and you live to sleep another day, right? So don't freak out about it. You've probably pulled all-nighters. You're going to be okay. And I think the next two things are just things that are net positive for everybody. Is like I said, the temperature, even almost a female any age, different times of the month, right? First and second half of the month, there's just fluctuations in temperature and temperature regulation. So I guess being overly aware of temperature, if that's something you never thought of in your entire life, like, that could be the time to invest in something like a mattress topper or something that's extra cooling. Silk pillowcases can be useful. But again, knowing that temperature is going to be a problem, be extra aware and do things to combat that. And then the last thing is just exercise. Exercise is just net positive in sleep. And up until about a year ago, I probably would have said, don't exercise too close to bedtime. Give yourself a 4-hour window. Some new stuff have come out, and literally any type of exercise, any intensity has a positive impact on sleep, quantity, quality. Now your sleep changes based on what type, high intensity exercise, closer to bed, shifts like the percentage of your cycles based on what type of sleep you need. But in general, it's just net positive, right? So I think it's keeping these things in your routine that are going to be a net positive for sleep and help sleep no matter what the situation, what's going on, really sticking to those things. And then knowing there's going to be its ups and downs, but those things are going to pull you through and make it the best of the worst potentially, right? There's going to be valleys, but at least you can elevate that baseline to a point that's sustainable.
Yeah. So a whole nother side, I feel, of the sleep industry, especially for people who are like really desperate and feel like they've tried everything, is sleep aids or sleep supplements. So I think you brought up sleep supplements once. One of the most common that people think of right away is melatonin. Like, what are your thoughts on melatonin? And are there other sleep aids or supplements that you feel like people should be taking?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Probably the one I get the most is this. And, when you look at melatonin, it's a hormone. It's produced in our body naturally. Often, a lot of places in Europe, it's actually, a prescription hormone. But yeah, I think that it's a little misunderstood. And I think people don't realize, like, how melatonin's even produced. Like, the absence of light is the main trigger, right? And I would say majority of people taking melatonin are not doing a good job, manipulating their light throughout the evening. So most people, from what I've seen, have the ability to produce melatonin. Like, it's not like their body has some type of issue where they're not producing melatonin. But, when you look at the study, there's not like a lot of detrimental stuff from taking it, but it also doesn't have that big of a positive impact. Like, some of the studies are like 1% or 2% increase in sleep. But I think that, like, the downside of that is creating this mentality of, like, needing something, or like that this is a quick fix, then you're reliant on it. So I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't like the mentality of it. There's so many things you can do prior to that. And I think that's the first thing. It's the first thing people jump to that's probably the least impactful for their actual sleep. And the other thing, the timing of it, people also botch. It's like, let's say they're going to go to bed at 10 and they'll take it at 9:50 when they get in their bedroom. And it's like, if you're going to do it, you take, it's a ramp up. So you'd want to take it, an hour or two before you actually go to bed. So that, I think people mess with that. But yeah, it's interesting. The one thing I will say, some of the new stuff, I know Andy Galpin was doing some research on it. And it seems when it's taken, in pill form, like there's super physiological levels, even in the morning still, right? And we want our melatonin to gradually come down in the morning time. So, anytime you're getting out of your body's natural rhythm of hormones and balance of these things, I just think, it's better to stick with your normal rhythms, especially when it's stuff that our body has a relatively easy time producing or doesn't seem to be an issue for a lot of people. And when someone's going down that path of like desperation, really, I haven't talked to a singular person that's like, I started taking melatonin and everything was fixed, right? There's probably a lot of things going on there in their life that could be better. And when you turn to things, like I was talking about temperature, exercise, relationships again, nutrition, even given the gap of food, like there's so many things that can make it better. And if you've exhausted all those options, go for it. But I do use it though, if I'm like traveling time zones, you can trigger like a little bit, try to move your circadian rhythm up or back, wherever you're going, which can be useful.
And since we are PTs here, I do want to tap into pain because we talk about, how essential, especially when we're talking about chronic pain and pain cycles within the body, it's not just movement. It's not just, you need to do this one exercise and everything's going to be better, but it's so much more integrated into our entire experience and entire life. So can you talk about how sleep impacts injury and pain? Because especially coming from you, like let us not talk about it. Please tell us.
I honestly think sleep just enhances your brain for better or for worse, right? So I think when sleep is poor, like those pain signals are just enhanced, like they're greater. Obviously inflammation, but I don't think people realize on a chronic scale. I don't think people understand like the link of like sleep is really about your brain and your nervous system and resetting those things. I don't think people think of like pain being driven from that system. I think they think of it like my ACL is healing. Well, yes, but the pain is coming from the signal of like your nervous system communicating that. And I don't think people understand how much that's impacted or made more sensitive by being chronically underslept. And then also injuries in general, it's amazing. Some of the injury studies are amazing when you look at the chances of someone getting injured over a season relative to how many hours of sleep they get. Like, I don't think people would have any idea, like even, 8 to 9 hours, 9 hours has getting that extra hour when someone's already getting 8 is a significant difference. Like for a college athlete, like it's wild, but I think those two things come back to like how sleep is perceived. And it's like the impact is like feeling tired when really it's like the brain's subconscious reactions, like things you can't out tough or out focus, something like an injury. It's like, it's all those like micro reactions and instantaneous movements that are having to take place to stabilize joints that are just slightly delayed, right? Like by milliseconds, but those milliseconds are the difference between could be a torn ACL and not, right? So I think it's shifting away from like sleep makes me feel tired to like sleep helps me function, my brain function at an optimal level from movement to thought process to emotion, like all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, that mirrors a lot of what we talk about, both in the risk of getting injured and also recovering from injury or pain, whether that's acute or chronic. I think there are so many massive, benefits. In general, you just say like sleep is the foundation and how it impacts every other system in the body. I don't know if there's any, there probably isn't, but easy way to talk about like how does having optimal sleep impact things like our immune system or our circulation or some of those other systems of the body.
It's pretty amazing. I feel like if you made like a list of like every single metric that it had an impact on, if you compared like 5 hours of sleep to 8 hours of sleep. But if I were to pick one word that sleep kind of encapsulates, encapsulates sleep is it's a reset. It's like the great reset, right? So from every single aspect, from the inflammatory markers of our nervous system to our emotional regulation, to our blood pressure. Like when you look at how much blood pressure drops throughout the night, it just seems like it is truly the only time we can get almost a reboot and bring things back to baseline. And I think there's things that can mimic like in different silos to mimic like the effects short term, but never like as an entire unit of the body. And then, like I said, for the brain, when you look at the brain waves during sleep and these times when our brain is fully synced together, like all firing as one wave, it just kind of shows that that's exactly what it's supposed to be. And I think that that's seen in all the other systems of the body. I think it's pretty remarkable, but I think it also, I think the brain it's so cool to look at the brain, because I think it's almost like the tip of the pyramid, and everything kind of like splinters out from there. And I think that's what we see in those other systems, like every single thing is impacted. But yeah, even like, cardiovascular, the cardiovascular system, and just the amount of stress, we see after the spring forward and people lose an hour of sleep. Like that's just such a snapshot of what people are dealing with every day. It's a huge bump in cardiovascular disease that following Monday, because majority of people are getting less sleep. But that's how most people are living their life, right? So your body is just under this chronic stress of being underslept, and everything's working harder. Not your heart, your immune system, like you said. So I think chronic stress and inflammation is kind of the foundation of all disease. And I think I almost feel like sleep is like the water from the fire hydrant, just constantly keeping all that down. And as soon as you let it go, it just flares up.
So before we go I want to ask about caffeine, because especially as a mom, it's hard to say like, oh, you're going to take away my caffeine.
You just sound like slightly sad every time you ask one of these questions, because you know this is coming.
come and rain on our parade.
And you're like, oh.
Yeah. Well, tell us, like, is it like 1 cup is going to ruin it? How late can I have coffee? Like, should I not be drinking coffee at all? Let's talk about caffeine.
It's funny how people come up to me and be like, I gave up caffeine because of you. Like, I don't drink any caffeine. And I was like, I didn't tell you not to drink caffeine. Like, there's some awesome health benefits from caffeine. Cognitive benefits, seem to be neuroprotective. Like, I drink caffeine every day, but I think it's the amount and the time, like intentionality, right? Like that's the name of the game. But the one thing caffeine does better than anything else is prevents us from feeling tired, right? It has, just blocks that adenosine, which is just a chemical that builds up in our brain that signals us to get tired, right? It works kind of with melatonin, hopefully at the same time, to wind us down. And caffeine blocks that, right? But you don't want that at night, right? So you have to think about how long is it going to stay in my system and what's the impact going to be. I think people over hype caffeine and like the amount of energy it allows you to have, from you think about like neuromodulator brain perspective, like it's not that amazing at boosting some of that stuff as opposed to like preventing you from feeling tired. So, really its use case would be like if you had to like stay up super late, it crushes for that, right? That's literally what's happening. But yeah, I think it's thinking about how much and when, right? So to give you an example of the differences, it's like if you had, let's say you had 3 cups of coffee, like a normal small coffee, like 100 milligrams of caffeine, pretty standard. Let's say you're going to have 3 cups total in a day. Like if you had all those at 8 a.m., just like that'd be like a large Starbucks coffee. By the time 10 o'clock rolled around, you'd only have like 25 milligrams of caffeine left in your system based on how slow it metabolizes. If you take that and spread them out from 8 to, let's say, 2 p.m., and you do, 1 in the middle, you'll still have, between 80 and 100 milligrams in your system when it's bedtime, which is the same as drinking a Red Bull at bedtime, right? So it's the same thing. It's just it's shift in the mentality when you're having it. So it's definitely not bad. I think it's just like thinking about when and how much. And the other thing is realizing, like I said, what it really does is prevent you from feeling tired more than anything. And I think people have it because they're dragging. And so be realistic in what it's going to do for your energy wise. I think people take it because they think it's going to work or they think it's giving them a lot of energy, but it's not the best for that. It doesn't, it doesn't do anything crazy from that perspective. I've actually been dabbling in sometimes in the afternoon. I've done nicotine gum, which is interesting more often because it has about half the half-life of caffeine. And so if it's around 1 p.m., I'll chew that every once in a while, like a super low dose, just to give a little pick me up if I have something important. And that seems to have less of an impact. The other thing it's doing is, they work slightly differently. So you're becoming less, used to, or you're not building up a tolerance as much So I don't know, take it or leave it. It's kind of weird because I think nicotine's associated with like, cigarettes and cancer and all this stuff, but the nicotine isn't necessarily causing, the tobacco is what's causing a lot of that stuff, not necessarily nicotine, which is a stimulant, just like many other stimulants people dabble in.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of other people talk about the nicotine and high performance and, people knowing and being aware of the intentionality of when that can really help them optimize their performance. So I hear you on that. Also, these conversations about caffeine and drinking coffee later in the day, they sometimes make me feel that my ability to sleep well comes from some neurologic issues I have. I played football as well in college.
We get hit in the head a lot, It's like,
oh man, I was a fullback in a triple option offense, and and man, when you are in a triple option offense, you get tackled about 30 times a game, and you might carry the ball 6 times a game. So
that was 6 more times than me. We were in a power I, and they just were like, "Hey, go run in this guy as hard as you can," and then
go smash faces with middle linebackers and defensive ends all day.
That's it.
It's a rough life, but because I could literally down a half a pot of coffee at 4 p.m., 5 p.m.
There are some genes that play a role in
which we know you have.
We've done genetic testing, and I tested the highest possible for caffeine metabolism as well.
I'm super sensitive, which is weird. Like, if I have anything after 12, I'm in bad shape. So it's a nice thing.
I will literally get home from working at a coffee shop at 3:00, and there'll be a quarter pot of coffee left, and I'll just take it down.
When's the last time you didn't have any caffeine?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while. It's been a little while.
You should try it. It's not the most fun during the day, but like it's crazy how deep you sleep when you do it.
Yeah.
Just try it one time. I know it's going to suck a little bit, or even like maybe just do it like half the amount early in the day, because
I did. I'm gonna air out one of my bad habits. I was like a Celsius addict. Like I was really into Celsius.
Not a lot better though. They've changed the ingredients quite a bit.
Yeah, and I would try to limit myself to 1 a day because there's 200 milligrams of caffeine in their small cans. But I did a month. We do monthly goals, and I'm like, no Celsius this month.
It also tastes good, which makes it even more appetizing.
That too. But so I switched to coffee for a month, and I think that made a significant improvement just in how I felt in general. But maybe one of my monthly goals will just be, hey, let's cut caffeine for this month and see how the first few days or week might be a little bit rough, but I bet.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think you need to cut it all, but I think if you just got it done right in the morning, I think it just gives you an idea of like, even though you're sleeping, is it impacting your sleep? And it might not be a difference, but for me, it's like, I feel a pretty big difference, which kind of shows that it might be impacting the quality to some extent.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's so individual. It depends on so many factors for people, and really starting to identify what works for you is so key. Todd, this conversation has been so great.
Sad for you. No,
thank you. And I know that you have so much more information to share with people. So where can people find you?
I mean, I'm mostly on Instagram, just Todd Anderson. Dream Recovery is the company that I founded. But yeah, love to help people out. I'm always posting stuff about sleep. So any questions people have, fire away. If people send me questions in DMs, I always try to get to them in videos eventually.
Great.
Awesome. Well, we'll have everything in the show notes for people who are listening and interested. Todd, thanks for spending some time with us. And we love Nashville. So if we're ever out in the area, we'll hit you up.